Hi, welcome to my Woolly PhD. My name's Liz Scarf and this is a weekly vlog about what I'm currently learning and making in my anthropology PhD, all about wool. You can find an overview of the project and the introductory video on the channel. I don't go over it every week. But what has been going on this week? Well, this week I've been learning a bit about how things can be treated as texts. Texts, not texts on the phone, but like we often think a text is like a book or an article or something written in words, but the idea that actually objects themselves, say like this cake of yarn or this cardigan, can also be treated as a text. So this is super interesting, and as usual, I know nothing about it except like just this very, very early exposure to the idea and then playing with it. So that's a lot of what this, well, I'd say that's a lot of what we can expect in the first year of these videos. Maybe the second and third year, I might feel like I know a little bit more. Anyway, so for my interests, I think a bit about, I apply this idea to thinking about how a sweater, like a hand knit sweater, cardigan, whatever really garment, can act as a text. And to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what I was reading that led to all of this. Sometimes it's a jumble of different things I read. But one thing I do recommend is anything by Daniel Miller. This is one I'm reading at the moment called Stuff, and he's got quite a lot published about material culture. I think that's the kind of anthropologist he is. I'm not really across his work yet. I think this is the second or something I've read. So I'm going to read heaps more of his, sorry, that's Stuff. It's probably an academic book again, so, you know, out of the reach of anybody not enrolled in a PhD or working in academia, because academic books are horrendously expensive. Anyway, this is not that video. But so, yeah, he publishes a lot around material culture, and I'm particularly enjoying what he's writing in this book about how clothes aren't superficial, and how some cultures consider them superficial and others don't, and that these are related to different belief systems about identity and depth and, how you present and perform your social identity. And then in Western narratives would probably sort of say that clothing is seen as superficial, and then also those who are interested in them, like people and cultures and academics who are interested in clothing, are also somehow seen as superficial from that Western gaze, right? So there are cultures where clothing and appearance and makeup, it's not superficial at all. That is exactly how you express who you are, and you shouldn't hide it. You should be absolutely on display. That's what it means to be really honest and trustworthy. Super interesting. It's off track. I do recommend Daniel Miller too. So far, it's also funny. There's some really funny things, and I must say, I don't think so far in my readings, I haven't come across many academic writings where I'd go, oh, that kind of really made me laugh. So enjoying that. Anyway, but back to sweaters, it's text. So first, we have to sort of have a working definition of what text means, right? So in the, let's say, original Latin, there's probably multiple original Latins. I don't know anything about languages or Latin, let's just say. But the word textus, so where text comes from, means a thing that is woven, and comes from a stem of I guess it's of a kind of an old verb, texere, which is to weave, to join, to fit together, to braid, to interweave, construct, fabricate or build, right? So we could say lots of things have undergone a process of texere. Now, the common usage of the word text has simplified over time to just really mean written words, and also like recorded words too, right? But if we afforded text its original meaning, right, this kind of thing woven, and allowed the notion that something woven, joined, constructed, fabricated, like the broadest literal and symbolic meanings, it could apply to both written or compiled language, so audiobooks. A song is still a text, or a song with lyrics. Maybe a song without lyrics. Even the musical score is a text, maybe. Yeah, of course, it's constructed. And as well as any fabric that's woven or knitted or felted. A brick wall is probably so many things, right? We can consider a text because they are compiled. Because maybe text most broadly can be understood as a meaningful and or deliberate kind of compilation or form of creation, gathering together and ordering of material. So if we just took it as a literal description like that, we can easily say, yeah, a knitted sweater is absolutely literally a text. It's the result of texia. And we could end the discussion there and say, great. But that's not actually the interesting bit of this, right? So, because literal, I gotta slow down. It's so exciting. Literal understandings or literal meanings are like the smallest amount of information conveyed in communication, actually. The symbolic, the metaphoric, and the instructive meanings probably dominate communication more, and they're probably more important a lot of the time too, right? But so why did text or written words get called text? Well, obviously they're a kind of a weaving, a constructing, a fitting together. But it was also that the written word was kind of imbued with the power to instruct, to convey meaning, and to impart important knowledge about the world. Now, notwithstanding objects that have like religious, like a sacred or bewitched, how did I say this? Rewind. No, except I don't rewind. There's no editing. No production values in this vlog at all. Notwithstanding objects considered sacred or bewitched, right, in religious or other sort of spiritual or metaphysical worldviews, objects are generally not afforded the power of text now, despite the fact that they are texts. Beyond maybe being memory keepers for sentimentality, which I'm a huge fan of. I imbue objects with a lot of sentimentality. Although it's not right to say that I imbue them with it. It's not that simple. It's part of what my whole PhD is about. Anyway, this is like a hot mess of a vlog today. I think I'm pretty tired. It's the end of a long weekend of adventures. I'm not complaining, but yeah, if it's a bit messy, please hang in there with me. Anyway, so to think about a sweater, or any made object actually, so feel free to experiment with this with any made object you want to, handmade or not, right? To consider a sweater a text, we have to afford it the power to be meaningful, to tell a story, to instruct the individual or the society about how to conduct themselves, or to impart important knowledge about the world. Because this is all what we allow written words to do, because otherwise written words are nothing. They're nothing, right? But we give them a lot of power to do these things, right? Can a sweater do all of it? Yes, it can. Well, I think it can. So now I think there is a way to do a really beautiful example and explanation about how a sweater could do all of these things. I am not there yet. And so this is like a hodgepodge of different examples and thoughts about how a sweater is a text, and I am not going to cover it all, and it's not even going to be that complex, so please feel free to add your ideas in the comments as well about how you think of a sweater as a text. Now, it doesn't need to be handmade. It could be like a ready-to-wear, commercially made thing, right? It doesn't have to be handmade. But anyway, part of the story of... I'm going to have to talk about this later, but this hand spun... I spun this Cloverleaf Corriedale Stud fleece, was knitting a sweater. Anyway, I'll come back to that. But part of the story of this hand spun that I will be reminded of continually is that the sheep it came from, let's call him Buffhead for a pseudonym to protect his identity, he loved to put his head deep in the middle of the round hay bales. Now, I love this for Buffhead. I think that I'd be like that too. And I love this because it's a story about individual personality about sheep. Like the person who runs the farm, Ronelle, when I was buying the fleece, she said, oh, he really likes to put his head right deep in the hay bales, which is so cute, right? It's like she knows this about this individual sheep. It's not every sheep that does it, right? And we don't often afford sheep individual personalities. So that's part of the story that I like. But why would I be continually reminded of this? Because it means that there was so much vegetable matter in the fleece, basically grass. And there are still tiny, but no doubt scratchy little pieces of hay fibre still in the wool and in the fabric as I'm knitting it. So thanks, Buffhead, I will be reminded to stick my head deep in the hay bale every time I get scratched while wearing this garment. So that's a storytelling though, right? It's like that sweater, the vegetable matter in it, and that will keep shedding for years, right? And that'll keep irritating my skin for years and keep reminding me of this sheep who really liked to stick his head in the centre of the hay bale. It's pretty cute. Anyway, I like that. Another thing too, right, is like just like lines of handwriting on a page, they're actually like an inscription of the gestures and the movement of the hand and pen that wrote them. Moving the pen in deliberate patterns. And the stitches of a sweater are the same, right? They tell the story of gestures and movements of hands, holding needles and continuously looping yarn through itself in deliberate patterns. And it's all kind of held together by the tension in the yarn and the tension that the looping and a little bit more twisting creates, and all that sort of builds the fabric, right? In both writing and knitting, or handwriting at least, we can actually see the tension of the hands in the handwriting. And we can see it in the knitting as well. You can see the tension. And most of us know that if you knit while watching some kind of scary or highly stressful TV, your tension increases and your stitches get more compact, right? And if you're more relaxed, the knitting is actually a bit looser. Oh, that's so cool, right? That's part of a story embedded in the fabric. You might even remember at times, oh yeah, it got really tight there because I was watching that show about blah, 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 and it really irritated me. Right, so, but we can also see, right, the dedication or lack thereof, the attention to detail or lack thereof, the commitment to doing the task well. All these things are inscribed in handwriting and also in knitting. And we can make guesses, or we can have thoughts or curiosities into what that means, maybe about care or intentionality, and maybe it suggests something about the relationship between the writer and the reader, or the knitter and the person who's going to wear it, even if that person is the knitter as well, right? Do you knit for a higher standard when you knit for yourself, or a lower standard? That's interesting. So there's two ways in which we could think about sweaters as texts, as telling stories. Another one is a sweater can also instruct behaviour and impart useful knowledge about the world. So it teaches us at the very least how to care for a hand knit garment. And we can, it's not a problem in every culture, but it is in some parts of, let's call it Western culture, right? Is this idea that the human body is something that has to be washed out of the world continuously, right? And one of the things we can learn here is that you don't have to. It's not actually a good idea. We can interweave with matter without making it dirty. It's basically, the sweater does not need to be washed after every wear. Don't do it. It also teaches us how to slow down, right? That you cannot throw that thing in the washing machine. It demands a gentle hands-in warm water process, sometimes cold water, careful squeezing out in the towel, a thoughtful laying out on a flat surface, and depending on the temperature and the thickness of that sweater, that's going to take 2 to 7 days to dry, or maybe 1 if you're in a really hot place. It also teaches us about the dietary preferences and dining habits of cupboard moths, right? Who love cashmere best, and they love it best when it's combined with your skin cells and body oil. So the sweater does need to be washed sometimes, right? But they also love to eat in the dark, right? So sweaters are prey. Oh, I just love this. Sweaters are prey for cabbage moths, and they are protected by air and light and sometimes sealed plastic bags. Sometimes they need some time in the freezer. So these are ways in which a sweater can teach us some things about the world, hopefully before we have to learn those lessons the hard way. Something more painful. Well, that's not true. I'm being hyperbolic there. It is painful to shrink a sweater in a washing machine. I haven't done it. I'm a committed hand washer. but it happens to people and it sounds pretty sad. It is also really tragic to have moths get into a handmade garment. This hasn't happened to me in a handmade one, definitely in some garments, and it's been pretty sad. Anyway, last thought about sweater as text is I think about the gifting of a sweater to like a family member or a loved one. It doesn't just come with instructions about how to hand wash the knit, right? It also conveys messages about the relationship. So here's sweater as text conveying a message about care, maybe about future, maybe about past, maybe about obligation. Could be a whole range of things, right? But it is adding meaning and substance to the relationship in some ways. Now, I was reading an article by Joanne Turney, who writes a lot about knitting. And I can't remember the name of the article. I've talked about it here before. I think it's something about knitting and love. Anyway, she shares this story about advice from maybe a generation ago. Maybe it was in my mother's generation, certainly probably the generation before, right? The advice was to never knit a sweater for a boyfriend because he'll break up with you. Now, apparently there's actually quite a few stories that support this advice. He'll break up with you because the knitting of the sweater and the gifting of a sweater is an attempt to demonstrate both care, like a deep level of care, but also domestic proficiency and frugality, angling at marriage, and so it would scare him off. So you should only knit a sweater for a husband. So yes, don't get me started on the heteronormative gender narratives here, right? But the point is that the sweater is a powerful storyteller and symbolic text. Use it wisely, it could backfire. And I just think it still conveys really powerful messages, right, to knit a sweater for someone. A sweater is a lot of work. It's a lot more work than a scarf or a beanie, right? You could whip up a beanie in a weekend if you used a chunky knit, right? You struggle to knit up a chunky knit sweater in a weekend. Anyway, you know what I mean. They take a lot longer. Anyway, as I said before, there's got to be, and I know there is actually, lots of different ways that sweaters act as texts, including on the scale of like national identity, global politics as well. See my thesis for more on this, coming out in about 4 years. But yeah, if you have other thoughts about sweaters as text, pop them in the comments. I'd love to read them. And thank you for everyone who commented and brought some of your thoughts and experiences about gender in knitting and fibre crafting last week. That was so interesting. Gave me a few things to look up and look into. That was really cool. Okay, what have I been making? So this week I cast on some fingerless gloves in this hand spun that I did. This was from a merino top from Kathy's Fibres, and I can't remember the name of it, but when I look at it, I just think about Beatrix Potter's Peter Rabbit illustration. So I often just think Easter eggs and Peter Rabbit. I don't know. So anyway, that's what I call it in my head. So I cast on fingerless gloves, knitted about 5 centimetres, decided they were too big, frogged it back. So this is where I'm back at. So yeah, that was basically the swatch, because I didn't swatch first, because I think swatching for small circumference round knit, does that ever really work? I don't think so. Anyway, I did love how the colours were knitting up, and so that was really fun. I think it's really my first barber pole. And you see where you got those really contrasting colours in one strand, which is what I've been like aspiring to be able to make. Oh, that's even a better side. Oh, it's so gorgeous. Anyway, I love it. I'm looking forward to casting it on again. Okay. So in an unexpected plot twist in the life of this fibre, I showed you before and alluded to dramatic changes of direction. So that, again, this was gorgeous Cloverleaf Corriedale fleece, and I will put a link to them in the show notes. It's not always safe to buy fleeces unseen online. It is always safe to buy from Ronelle at Cloverleaf. She never puts anything online to sell that she thinks is not up to scratch for spinners. So yeah, you're totally safe to buy all her fleeces online. Yeah. Anyway, tragic and exciting twist. as the best twists often are, is that I got all this done. It doesn't look like much, but this is like a thin 4-ply, so this was a lot. I got the collar, I got all the short rows, I got about 16 rounds of the yoke done on this sweater. I don't know, what does it look like? It looks like just a pile of rags at the moment. Anyway, I got all this done. This is quite a few hours of work, thousands of stitches, and I'm going to pull it out. So I was so fixed on this fleece becoming a squishy, warm sweater, but I spun the fibre too fine, and as I knit it up, the fabric's just too thin, and I don't need a dark brown, slightly lumpy, thin sweater. I just can't see that I'm going to wear it. And I know it'll bloom a little bit in blocking, but it's not ever going to be kind of squishy. And I prepped all this for woolen spun, so it's got the potential to be super soft and squishy as a garment too. So I want to keep that potential. So the neck is also too open. Anyway, so many problems with it that I am going to do the grown-up thing, and I'm going to frog it, and I'm not going to do it here and now because I know that's disturbing. But that's the tragic part of it. The exciting part though is about really kind of knowing when to change track, and I'm going to try a DK vest with it instead. I'm going to knit it double, and I love vests, and it should be more squishy, and maybe the slight lumpiness will kind of even out a bit more. So I think that's good. So in the biography of this fibre, I think I talked about this last week, maybe the week before, maybe I haven't talked about it yet, maybe I've just written about it. Anyway, its first career was warmth on the back of a sheep, and I presume it was quite successful at that. It smells so good. Then it had a transitional role as a commercial product, raw fleece, and that's when I got it through a mechanism of trade with the farmer. After some transformational stages, so lots of washing and carding, carding, and spinning, became yarn, and then its next career was a sweater, but it didn't quite even make it to full sweater scale, so not a success. So new career as a vest is on the horizon, and as the knitter, I've got to say, I hope this one is a successful career path. We shall see. But my big lesson is don't hold on tight to what you want something to become when it's clearly not what is going on. I could have skipped several thousands of stitches if, when I finished the collar and I realised this is just not what I wanted, I should have pulled the plug then. I just kind of thought, well, let me just see what the fabric looks like, because a rib, you can't really tell what the fabric's going to be like from the rib, and I had swatched. Anyway, I think I'm still learning about how to be really ruthless about if I don't really love it, ditch it and try something different. I'm still kind of like tolerating things that are kind of okay, and I'm trying to learn to stop doing that. Anyway, it's probably not quite inspiration for if you also need to change track on a project, but maybe it's some company at least. You're not alone. Me and probably thousands of people around the world will be frogging something back this week. So on a less depressing note, it's not depressing, but like on an actual make progress on something, I have made some significant progress on this Musselburgh beanie, which is in an upcycled merino and possum fibre from New Zealand, and this can be lovely. So soft and squishy. Okay, that's what I have been making and unmaking this week, and hopefully next week I will be able to show you some progress on the vest. Yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye.